I can't believe I called her by the wrong name. She's never coming back. I've ruined everything. Maybe I should email her? Or just move to a new city? We've all been there, right? Right? If you didn't call your client the wrong name, you did one of the other mistakes in this episode. I am sure of it. What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Today, we're gonna dive into those therapist mistakes, the kinds that we all make. We're not gonna tackle the really big no-nos. We're not gonna tackle the big ethical errors, the legal mistakes that do happen, but I would argue don't happen to all of us. But since we're all human beings, at least for now until AI takes over, 100% of us will make mistakes. And I want to talk about those very human mistakes that even the most ethical of therapists, the most follows all the best practices of therapists out there will still make at least some of these mistakes that we're going to cover today. And I would also like to talk a little bit about how to engage around these mistakes, how to do some repair work when necessary. And I would argue a lot of times healthy repair when we make a mistake as a therapist is a lot of the meat and potatoes of healthy healing therapy work. So I'd love it if we reframed mistakes as not a full-on mistake, but just a genuine human interaction. And I'm more interested in seeing how we interact around the mistakes rather than making sure we never make any mistakes at all costs. Always, 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 always. But of course, if there is some pattern of mistakes, then take action to do what you can to minimize those mistakes. But eventually, even if you do everything just right, you will make some of these mistakes. I turned to my dear friend, Reddit, and the Our Therapist subreddit did not disappoint. So I already started putting this episode together, and then I thought, what are other therapists saying are some of the common mistakes that they're making? And I sprinkled some of those in here as well. And we're gonna talk about them. Okay, the first mistake that I saw all over Reddit, it came up for multiple therapists. So I'm sure this has applied to at least some of you listening or watching, is forgetting a session. Oh my gosh, I had a 3 p.m. today. It's 5:17. Whew. That's tough. It's a scenario we like to try to avoid, right? Obviously, we're not trying to invite that scenario, but it happens. Later in the episode, we're going to talk about different ways to approach the repair process. But I'd say for me, generally speaking, if this were to happen to me, one, definitely this merits an apology. But I think there's more than just saying I'm so sorry, that was a mistake. Obviously, it was a mistake. Now, it is possible that your client is a saint or just, wired totally differently than I am and not especially bothered by it, or it was just, a slight annoyance that only takes a moment to repair. But I could see clients potentially requiring quite a bit of repair work for this kind of error. So just kind of check in and see what their needs are, but I wouldn't skip over it. I would not brush this under the rug quickly, whereas some of the other errors might potentially be able to be kind of skipped over relatively quickly. Another common therapist error that folks brought up in the Reddit land was mixing up our clients' stories or, confusing certain details in our clients' stories. How's everything been going since your brother moved in last week? I don't have a brother. If this happens to you, just know, we are storing so much information in our brains. So, if you're finding it consistently really difficult to remember a lot of significant details about your clients, then that's definitely something to look into. But there's no way we're going to hold every single detail about every single client in our minds at all times. And so, if we manage to let one of these mistakes slip up where we mix up details about two of our clients' lives and switch them over, to just be a little bit more accepting that is a possibility and to make appropriate repairs as needed. If you're ever feeling unsure, it's always okay to ask your client to clarify or to remind you. That way you can at least own your space and call it like it is rather than just being overly confident and stepping right into it. But sometimes we don't realize it and we step right into the trap anyway, and we can still repair it afterwards. I can just feel the cringe for this next one, but the next error is calling a client by the wrong name. And how do you feel about that, Sam? I'm not Sam. That's her ex. Listen, there's a lot of names that we're keeping track of in our little brain Rolodex, and yeah, that's bound to happen sometimes. If this is something that happens to you a lot, I think it's okay to just own it about yourself. To say like, you know what? I have this capacity to remember the minute details of like what you ate in your sandwich 4 sessions ago, but for whatever reasons, names just leave my mind. So I'm so sorry. I may need reminders of the names of your loved ones, or, you know, I've been known to misspeak and call my clients by the wrong name. Just know it's not you. I do this all the time. And if it's not something that happens for you all the time like that, but it comes up and it happens one time, no need to flip your lid. Of course, check in with your clients, see how it's affected them. And I think it's appropriate to show some level of like genuine, whether it's, you know, embarrassment or like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I cannot believe I just made that error. But it's also not usually particularly helpful to like overly linger on it. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. And oh, I'm so sorry. I've never done that before. And yeah, there's no need to like make it into something bigger than it was. A little later in the episode, we'll touch on some of the reasons why it's not so helpful to be overly apologetic. But yeah, just let it take up the amount of space that it needs and then move on if your client seems ready to move on. Another category of mistake that several therapists brought up in the Our Therapist subreddit is jumping to advice too quickly or jumping to advice at all. I don't know if maybe I should break up with them. Honestly, yeah, I kind of think you should. If something like that happens, you can always circle back to it if you either right away in that same session or the next session and say, you know what? When we were talking about this, you brought up this question and I answered right away. That's not something that I typically do, but I think I went there because I really care about you and I've noticed how difficult things are in this relationship for you. You know, we can still acknowledge that like our human side kind of slid right in, shared some thoughts, and realized that like, yeah, when we care about somebody, it's harder to stay impartial. And so we can acknowledge like, oop, I see that you're going through a lot. I see that the situation that you're in is really hard, or it's, you know, whatever the scenario is, it's affecting you in these different ways. And the part of me that really cares for you and wants you to thrive came in and started speaking. And I kind of took my therapist hat off for a second. But can we circle back? Can I put my therapist hat back on? And can we see what might be most helpful in this situation instead of what I said before? And another category of common therapist mistake is like jumping to an incorrect assumption or diagnosis or treatment direction without getting enough clarification from our clients that this is the direction that they want to go. I just want to feel less anxious. Right. So let's unpack your whole relationship with your mother then. What? Even if that's your approach, like a bit of prefacing can be helpful. You know, sometimes it can be helpful to go back and see if there's any patterns earlier in our lives that are tied to that anxiety. Would you be willing to walk down that path with me for a little bit? Let's see where it leads us, and we can always come back and try a new path, right? There's ways to kind of bring clients with us, but sometimes it can be really easy to just jump right in. So now let's talk a little bit about how to react when one of these blunders comes up in therapy. And I think the biggest takeaway that I'd like to emphasize is it's really important to not overreact, and it's really important to not underreact. Hi, good to see you. How's it going this week? So you forgot our session last week. Oh, right. Sorry about that. That was really upsetting. Anyway, let's pick up where we left off last week. I think it's much more appropriate to assess in each scenario, like how big of a reaction is useful here and what reaction is kind of most effective at repairing what happened. So if you're in a scenario where you realize you made one of these blunders, if the session already ended and you're kind of going back and realizing maybe you made an error, or maybe you're waking up at 2 a.m. and a night sweat realizing you made a big mistake during your session earlier that day, like if it's after the session, just pause. Don't do something right away to try to fix what happened. We want to take a moment to make sure your system is regulated before you take any action. If it's 2 a.m. and you realize you made a big mistake, we do not want you to hop out of bed and write the 12-paragraph apology email to your client. Definitely wait until your system is more regulated first. I already started touching on this, but like the next step is assessing the impact on our client. That's more important, not just the impact on ourselves. We can tend to that in our own time, but like, how is this affecting our client? Like, this is worth mentioning. Our clients are often amused when we do an oopsies like this. It makes you a person in their eyes. So keep that in mind, that might be one of the available responses, but there may be cases where our client is really negatively affected by our blunder. So it's important to assess and try to assess accurately. Like some clients may be really impacted, but they might be sort of brushing it off like some narrative in their mind. Or if we wear an IFS hat, we might say some part of them is saying like, don't make it a big deal. You don't want to be a complainer. You're just too sensitive, or whatever that part of their brain is telling them. So it's filtering out what they're really thinking or feeling, that they're really bothered or upset or hurt by what happened, but they're kind of like trying to regulate themselves. Use your therapist skills to assess like, hey, am I noticing actually that maybe there might be something more? And of course, any mistake you might have made, own it. That just claim it. Don't brush it aside. Don't say like, I had a really good excuse. I mean, sometimes clients might find it helpful to hear a little bit of context, or just whatever the context is of like, ooh, I'm so sorry, I slept through my alarm, and that's totally not acceptable. And yeah, that brings us to the next reminder to not over apologize. Like if you have said, I'm so sorry, that shouldn't have happened, I'm gonna do what I can to not let that happen again, and then your client seems like they're okay and ready to move on, you don't need to keep bringing it up. But if you're just bringing it up because it's still on your mind, then that might be more reflective of something you feel like you're needing in order to move on from this. And your client shouldn't have to be the one to kind of tend to you, to maybe give you reassurance that everything is fine. I am so sorry. I know I called you the wrong name last week and I feel awful about it. That was just not okay. I haven't slept. I've just been thinking about it over and over in my head about how did I manage to call you the wrong name, and I'm so sorry. Are you okay? That'd be a great time to bring it somewhere else, like a trusted colleague, consult group, supervision, a place like that, to say, hey, I already did all this repair work, but it's still bugging me. Part of me kind of wants to still reach out to my client and ask if everything's okay. Like, can you help me see, did I miss something? And if it's fine to let it go, somebody else can kind of give you that reminder. Or if you're worried that it says something negative about you or whatever you need reassurance about, get it from somebody outside of your client. And ultimately, I think there is great value that when we make these mistakes, not that we try to do them on purpose for this reason, but when they just authentically happen, as they will eventually because we're human, then there's this really rich opportunity for repair. And I think repair work societally is so poorly modeled, and we have very few examples of how to move through mistakes with somebody we care about, that having it happen live in the therapy session and then you modeling what it looks like to own your mistake and repair it healthily can be one of the most valuable things we can offer to our clients in the context of the work that we're doing. There's a huge value in that. So I hope I've conveyed in this episode that, one, mistakes are inevitable. It will happen. It has happened. Unless you are brand new in the field, it's probably happened somewhere, even if it's not on this list, and it certainly will happen. And the repair and how we tend to our clients and center their needs without making it about us is the valuable skill that we hope to learn. It's not to never, ever, ever make a mistake ever, or never make that mistake again. Certainly we do what we can to minimize mistakes, but even with our best efforts, we will make a mistake again. So Let's carry on in a way where we can repair well in a therapeutic way, rather than avoiding every mistake. And before we close, I'd like to thank TherapyNotes.com for sponsoring today's video. TherapyNotes helps with all of your practice management needs, from scheduling to notes to billing, and they have a whole suite of AI features now available that can streamline your note-taking process. You should check it out if you haven't looked at it yet. If you'd like to check out TherapyNotes, you can get 2 months to try it for free, including all of their AI features that they've rolled out with no commitment, just by clicking the link in the description of this video. Well, as always, I hope you found this episode supportive. If you clicked on it because maybe you made one of these mistakes or another one, it's okay. Just check in and see what amount of repair is appropriate for your client's needs. And if it's still bugging you after you already did it, then that's a good opportunity to check in with someone who's not your client, a colleague, a supervisor, etc. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well. My life. What is my life?